and thanks for joining me on, I believe it's part 6 of the FC-170 wrecker build. Please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. I do appreciate it. The channel actually grew a little bit this last video, so thanks again. This time on the FC build, we're going to finish the aluminum decking on the bed and how I got that handled, set the cab on the big hinge, and set up some actuators so that we can tilt the cab up and down. I started off with 2 full sheets of this diamond plate aluminum. The local metal supplier that I purchased it from also offers breaking and shearing, so I took in a couple small drawings. They broke and sheared what I needed. They have huge presses and brakes there, so I didn't have to do that part of it. All of the leftover pieces I had that didn't have to have brakes or anything sheared, I could just do minor cuts with, I saved and used them in areas like this. And you can also see how I mounted all this decking. I just drilled holes and then I tapped the holes so that I could bolt the pieces down to the wrecker frame. I tracked down and bought a bunch of this vinyl edging, which I put on all of the edges where they were noticeable. It made the deck look a lot more finished than it would have without it. The next thing I decided I needed was a chain tray to mount on the deck. This was one of those old racks you could buy that would slide into a receiver hitch. And I cut it in half, and then I welded a plate to one end of it, cleaned the rest of it up, and painted it so that it would look fairly nice. And then I took some of that diamond plate aluminum and I cut it to size and just hand formed it around the inside of it. Used some sheet metal screws to hold it in place. Once that was done, I went ahead and mounted it to the deck, and I'm pretty happy with how this came out. I also used a little bit of this scrap aluminum for the trailer plug for the tow lights. Every now and then I come up with some off-the-wall idea, and this is one of them. I decided to make some flamethrowers out of the exhaust pipes, propane driven, so they would work while the vehicle's running. And it did work. There's a downside to having flamethrowers, though. You can see in the original pictures with the flamethrowers, my smokestack was about here. Once I had the cab on, I raised the smokestack height to here so it would be above the cab level. Now, trying to do flamethrowers and keep them hidden, I kept the igniters way down low. I had just enough oxygen to ignite them with basically it was like a barbecue igniter, and they would work. Now, once I added this extra pipe, to make it work correctly, I would have to put the igniters up here so they would find some oxygen to ignite that propane. With the truck running, it would work okay. My issue started becoming when the truck's not running on a vertical stack this tall, and the propane coming in down low in the igniter distance. Basically, I'm filling a 6-foot tube full of propane and hoping the ignition goes up and not down. Basically, I decided to scrap the idea because if I had a failure, I'm basically driving a bomb. So I did keep the nozzles because I've got something else I've decided to do with this, which I think will be kind of cool too. Well, after 6 months, my naked cab came back. Some of it was better than I thought, some of it was worse than I thought, but at least I have a clean area to start working with. I had a few friends come over. It took 5 of us to lift this thing on and just set it on top of the body mounts. There's 2 things to notice with the cab just sitting here. One, those smokestacks were too low, which I just got finished talking about. The other is this cab was sitting way too high on the suspension, which we corrected that on a couple videos ago too. Even though this interior and doghouse was all hacked up, we still had to do some modifications to make my engine accessories clearer, and we'll address that shortly. First things first, with the hinge bolted together, let's get this cab tilt working. So, to lift the cab, I decided to go with these. These are actuators. They're electric. There are worm gear inside of them. These are made by Fratelli. They're made, from what I understand, for like the deck lids on a cigarette boat, for lifting those. Someone told me once they were also for boat motor actuators, for lifting the motors out of the water. That I don't know. But for my purposes, these will work great because they don't use a lot of electricity. They're fairly low amp. This one has a 24-inch stroke, so it will lift the cab far enough. Now, this one's rated at 400 pounds, so that means straight up vertically. As you start tilting the angle, those ratings change dramatically. I started off with these, which were 400 pounds, and the next step up, Fratelli can re-gear these so that they're 1,000 pounds a side. Now, the 400-pound ones worked okay. I have them at a pretty steep angle, right up until I got the rest of the interior in and the glass in. At that point, they were struggling to lift this cab up. So I swapped them out for the 1,000-pound ones. They're a lot slower, but they go up really smooth and easy, and they'll lift the cab no problem. A pair of these, one on each side. To start off, I held the cab up with a pipe and kept it from falling forward with a big ratchet strap. To start building these mounts, I started off with some 3/16 angle iron. I drilled the holes that matched the Fratelli pivot mounts that I bought from them directly. Once I had the holes drilled and knew they would mount correctly, I welded a gusset into the mount. Then I did a test fit and just tacked in the mount to make sure it would clear everything. Once I knew everything would clear, I went ahead and burned the lower mounts in. The upper mounts on the cab I did almost the same. These are 1/8 inch instead of 3/16. I drilled the holes just like in the lowers. Then I kind of welded all the angle pieces together inside a structural area of the wheel well. That way I was comfortable it wouldn't push through the sheet metal when it was under load. Wiring these actuators is actually pretty simple. They're just electric motors. So to make the motor go up, I put positive power to one wire, ground to the other, and the actuator extends. To make it go down, I just reverse those wires, and I take the wire that was positive and I ground it, and I take the wire that was on the ground and I put power to it, and then the motor comes down. Simple so far, right? So I'm running 2 motors. So first thing I do is I tie those wires together. So both blue wires are tied together, both black wires are tied together, and then I run a single wire from each of those to the switch. It's just less clutter to the switch is all I'm doing there. Now on the switch, I'm using this bigger switch because it's a little easier to see, but I've got 3 poles on one side and 3 poles on the other side. It's a momentary switch, so I push it down to engage one side of the switch, I let go and it goes back to center. I push up on the switch, it goes to the other poles on the switch, and goes back to center. Now on the switch part of it, the middle pole on one side goes to a 12-volt power source. The middle pole on the other side goes to a chassis ground. Now, one of those wires from the motor I plug into this. The other side I plug into the other wire going to the motor. Here's where the trick comes in. On this wire here, I run a jumper wire to this opposite caddy corner pole. From this wire, I run a jumper wire caddy corner to this pole. What that does is when I push the switch up, power goes to one side and ground goes to the other side. When I flip the switch down, it reverses those 2 wires, so my motor's reversed that way. That's all there is to it. And you don't need to run a relay in this one because I'm running low amp motors, a higher amp switch, and wire that accommodates. Also, running a relay, you would end up running multiple relays in order to accommodate this. So this is a real simple way if you decide to run a tilt cab on these style of actuators. The switch I actually used was basically a toggle switch. This is what the front of it looks like, and this is what the back side of it looks like. Real simple and easy to use. I also added a rubber cover so it was a little more weatherproof. With all the mounts fully in place, fully welded, and my switch is all wired, test drove down and then test drive up. At this point, I'm really happy with how it works, and we'll be moving on to the next phase. First thing I did was cut out the places that were interfering with the engine accessories. Once that was done, I started making some templates out of cardboard, and those cardboard templates I then used to break metal the same way. Now I used 16 gauge metal, and I just clamped a piece of angle iron to the workbench to break the angles in it so it was not that hard. Once I got everything done, I started off by tacking it in. Then I started welding it in fully. And I didn't just weld the top side, I also welded the underside. At the same time that I was doing this, I re-welded a lot of the structure that someone had cut out of this, and then where people had hacked up, like the heater box would no longer fit, I repaired all of that area and welded it all in too. Once I had everything fully welded, I went ahead and ground it down and made it look a little more finished and prepped it for paint. If you notice that little piece on the top, the front doghouse is what I call it. A buddy of mine at an HVAC tin shop made that for me. If you remember the master cylinder, we did the four-wheel disc upgrade on and hung it on the wall. It's now off the wall, mounted to the bracketry, which is also part of the steering column bracketry, and mounted into the Jeep. You can see this Heim joint that I mounted to the steering bracket, which also will accommodate the outer portion of a double D steering sleeve, which a lot of hot rodders use. The Toyota steering box that I bought and installed into this FC had this U-joint on it, so I knew it would fit. I just cut the original shaft off and then welded a universal double D steering shaft to it. Once I had the U-joint and the double D welded on the lower section and kind of working slowly as to figure out how high I needed it, I started figuring out how much of that shaft needed to show, how much it didn't. With the cab down, it's pretty easy. Then with the cab up, it has to extend a significant amount, you can see here. And keep that in mind, everything on this cab, when you tilt it, has to extend, like your brake lines, your throttle linkage, your shifter linkage, all your electrical, everything has to move with the cab. The next video, we're going to start doing a whole bunch of body work, or some body work, because I get over body work real quick. About 15 minutes of sanding and I'm done. So this isn't going to be a show truck, just to give everyone a heads up about that, but next time we're going to do some body work. Well, I thought I'd give you a little bit of perspective on some of these videos. To make my 20-minute video, I've probably got 4 or 5 hours into just the video editing, but the real kicker is for the first 6 videos on this project, I've probably got close to 500 hours into this project. So there's a lot of time, and I wanted to kind of put that out there because there's a lot of people I know that get started on these projects and expect it to be done in, 5 hours like it was in the video. It really doesn't work that way. Anyway, that's going to do it for today. So thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. I do appreciate it. And we'll get some more done next time.
about. And give them a chance to make things right. But just be honest for once in a while. It was a part of a silly joke. Well, isn't fun, don't stand the more. Don't lie to me, don't lie to me. Nobody chance but fall in love. What makes you happy, what makes you drown. But what you want, what makes you bad. And give them a chance to make things right. But just be honest for once in a while. It was a part of a silly joke. Well, isn't fun, don't stand the more. Don't lie to me, don't lie to me. Nobody chance but fall in love. What makes you happy, what makes you drown. But what you want, what makes you bad. And give them a chance to make things right. But just be honest for once in a while. It was a part of a silly joke. Well, isn't fun, we can stand the more.
Try hard left. Try turning left. See if it's flying. Oh, maybe. There's one way to skin it that.